Ellie Mae O'Hagan. Hi, thank you very much for having me. It's a real honour to be here, especially because we're going to be seeing the legendary Tony Benn, who's a hero of mine my whole life, so it's a real honour to be here with all of you, especially the workers at GMB that are taking such a courageous stand against unfair cuts. So I just want to take this opportunity to offer you my solidarity and support and to say how much I admire the work you've done so far. Thank you very much for that introduction. I hope somebody's going to be sending this video to Owen. And I'd also, I of course taught him everything he knows. And I'd also like to point out that Richard Sennett doesn't actually have any hair, so that was quite an easy battle to win. I'm here to talk about the Labour Party, which is obviously our great existential crisis of people on the left. As has been mentioned, I work for Unite when I'm not on Newsnight shouting at Tories. And one thing I noticed working at Unite is this sort of strange relationship that the left wing has with the Labour Party. I actually did an event at Unite recently where a lot of Unite members came along, and Owen was there actually, and it sort of descended into a very kind of angst-ridden conversation about the Labour Party, where one by one, everybody in the room went round and begrudgingly and embarrassingly admitted that they were all members of the Labour Party, each more ashamed than the last, worried that everyone else would judge them, despite the fact that everybody there was in fact embarrassed and reluctant members of the Labour Party, including myself. And I often find that my relationship with the Labour Party is a little bit like having a sort of dysfunctional relationship with a husband, in that you're constantly disappointed by them and desperate that they will change. And I often feel like, you know, that watching the Labour Party do what it does is like sitting at home at sort of 11 at night thinking he said he'd be back by 10, and then a week later he just spontaneously cooks dinner and you think he can change, he is making an effort, and then a week after that he's back out at 11 at night and you're thinking, God, when am I going to leave? And that is, you know, that's what it's like, I think, being left-wing and on the Labour Party. It's this constant to and fro of sort of, be the party I want you to be, and there's little hints that it can be, but there's also great disappointments. And I think that is a sort of constant struggle that we have. And I know we're all talking about Owen a lot, and I know that Owen has a very romantic idea about the relationship between groups like this, like the LRC, of which I'm also a member, and the unions and the Labour Party, which is, you know, the Labour Party exists as the political voice of the working class, of working people. And obviously that is what it was set up for, as the Labour Representation Committee all those years ago. But I'm afraid that my experience and vision of the Labour Party these days, based on my life experience, the relationship I've had with it in my lifetime, is that it's much more pragmatic than that. It isn't that we have this romanticised idea of it's the working class in Parliament. I mean, Owen often tells that lovely story about Keir Hardie, the first day that he went into the Houses of Parliament, and some rich person asked him, "Are you here to work on the roof?" And he said, "No, I'm here to work on the floor." And that's a really beautiful sort of legend almost of what the Labour Party was created for, the Labour Representation Committee was created for. But actually, these days, I just think that the role of the left in the Labour Party is really to save it from itself and to curb its worst excesses, I think, unfortunately. And I really felt this when I went to Labour Party conference last year. You know, you see those stands, you see the Unite stand next to a stand of, you know, Deloitte, and then kind of Barclays has a stand. And you can just see these awful companies just circling the Labour Party like vultures, just desperate for the left to leave, and then they'll just swoop in and turn it into this awful kind of wing of capitalism like they really want it to be. I mean, when I think that really that's our role, that has been our role for a long time now, is to sort of, to be the kind of barrier between that and our party, which it is. I mean, I think about, you know, the sort of 1997 to 2007, which, you know, were called the dark years, the dark ages. What might have actually happened in those days? What might have happened? What might the Labour Party have done had it not been for people like the people in this room holding it back? And I think that I'm sad to say that, but I think that is what our role has been in recent years, and that's why I have been a member and I've sort of stayed in the Labour Party is because I think, God, if people like me leave, what will it do? But now I think, with Ed Miliband, I think that the Labour leadership has probably got the right ideas about things. You know, I think it's done some things that I feel I've been impressed by. I was very impressed with Ed Miliband whipping his MPs against the benefits rating bill, which is basically George Osborne's bill to only increase benefits by 1%, which is less than inflation. So in other words, to cut people's benefits below a reasonable standard of living. And Ed Miliband refused to vote for that and it insisted that his MPs voted against it. And I think that's, I think he wasn't given enough credit for that. I think that was a very brave thing to do. And I was really pleased to see that. I also think that he's been very good on immigration. He's refused to get involved in that debate in a toxic way like the Tories have. You know, with the issue of Mick Philpott, who caused the death of his 6 children, I was very impressed with Ed Miliband's stance on that as well, that he refused to engage in any of those conversations where Mick Philpott's behaviour was used as a representation of people on benefits as a whole, and I thought that was very good. And also it did represent a change, because I must say that if Liam Byrne had been in charge of the PR that day, it might have been a different story. So that's been very good, but I think that what Labour is lacking at the moment is political bravery. That's the thing that I think is really the problem that Labour has at the moment. I just don't think it's brave enough. It's not going far enough. It doesn't have faith in people like I think it should. I think that, you know, if we put forward a radical anti-cuts message, people don't want cuts. You know, I think that people like public services, and I think that if we did that well and we did it bravely, I think that people would come with us, and I just don't think that Labour is brave enough. It still thinks that it's in a conversation with the Daily Mail. It still thinks that public opinion and the Daily Mail is the same thing, and it isn't. You know, I think a really great example of that is the nationalisation of public services. 61% of people want the railway to be nationalised. You know, Labour hasn't said anything about that. I mean, but neither of any of the national papers. And I think that if Labour could see beyond headlines and actually think about what people want and what matters in people's daily lives, then they'd be able to go a lot further with what they're calling a social democratic message, but what I would like to be a socialist message about public services. You know, if you said to the average person on the street, your rail fare is too high, and we're going to do something about that, we're going to have to take control of the railways because your rail fare is too high, no one I know would turn around and say, oh my God, you're a communist. You know, people would just say, yeah, my rail fare is too high, I'm really glad that you're doing that. And I think that, you know, Labour needs to be braver about those things. I also think that Labour has got this sort of fixation with this strange idea that you need to destroy your values so that you can get into government and then protect them, which is a really bizarre thing that it's always had that I don't quite understand and frustrates the hell out of me. So, for example, a really great example of that is, you know, Ed Ball saying that they would need to continue with the public sector pay freeze so they can presumably get into government and protect public sector workers. It's a strange logic that they have. We must go along with the right-wing consensus. We can't rock the boat, so when we get into power, we can look after people. But actually what that does, it doesn't look after people. What it actually does is it means that it legitimises right-wing ideas so that when you get into power, there's no actual left-wing kind of space that you can move into in order to push left-wing forward ideas. Push forward left-wing ideas. So when you get into power, things that might have been possible for you if you'd really pushed left-wing ideas when you were in opposition actually are politically impossible because you've been agreeing so much with the right-wing that you've created a consensus. You know, and that's what happened with Blair and Thatcher, is the things that Thatcher did at the time were incredibly radical by anybody's standards at that time. But because she did it, and then Blair followed suit, now the idea of totally nationalised public services seems like something you'd see in Soviet Russia, but it's only because the political consensus has been moved so much in the last 30 years that now it's impossible. So Labour really needs to snap out of that line of thinking. So I'm not really one for speaking for a long time. I always prefer to listen to what the audience have to say because you know, I wasn't elected. I'm just lucky really to be here. So it's much more interesting and important that you have a say. So I'm going to finish now, which is what can we do about it? And I think really we just have to keep doing what we've always done, which is we have to force Labour's hand. And that is, you know, that takes work on the ground because people are only ever, my dad always says, and he's my main political compass, he always says that politicians aren't leaders, they're followers. That public opinion changes, and then the political leaders sort of run and try and catch up with it. I think gay marriage is a great example of that, where all of the public was suddenly like, well, what's the big deal about gay marriage? And then, you know, David Cameron was like, yeah, I've been asking the same thing, you know, which obviously he hadn't. You know, and that's really what the relationship that politicians have with the public. And I think that, so I think what we need to do is we need to organise, which is what we've always done, and we need to carry on doing that, and we need to really do it all the time. We need to do it as often as we can with as many allies as we can. We need to create a broad-based anti-cuts movement, and I'm very excited about the People's Assembly, which is coming up, because I think that will be a really exciting starting point for us all. And we need to change public opinion on the streets by convincing people that there is an alternative, that it doesn't have to be this way, and then the politicians will follow suit. And I want to mention You Can Cut, and I don't know if any of you, those of you who know me and follow what I write about and what I get involved in, I am involved in You Can Cut, and I have been since its inception. And not that I want to be big-headed about does anyone here not know what You Can Cut is before I carry on? Okay, You Can Cut is a campaign that started in October 2010 when a group of about 30 people went and occupied a Vodafone shop to protest about the fact that Vodafone were avoiding 6 billion in tax, and at the same time 7 billion was being cut from the welfare bill. At the time, tax avoidance was a non-issue, it wasn't being debated, and I remember at the time I was called up a lot to talk in the media about it, and it was really impossible to talk about. You know, the thing that you'd get a lot was, well, everybody does it, there's nothing we can do about it, really, is there? And last week, or a couple of weeks ago, I went on Sky News and debated Len Shackleton, a charming man from the Institute of Economic Affairs, big fan of Margaret Thatcher. And I didn't even say anything. I just said, well, your views agree with me. And I won the debate. I don't even have to open my mouth anymore to convince people that tax avoidance is wrong, because it's become public opinion in 3 years, just from those people doing that action. And then all of a sudden, the tax experts who've been shouting for years, using the publicity that was created, jumping in there and backing it up with facts and figures and keeping it in the public eye all the time. We've managed to make tax avoidance a total non-issue into a national scandal. Even the Daily Mail runs campaigns about tax avoidance now, and I just don't think that would have happened without grassroots direct action. You know, so I think that if a group of young people with a bit of spare time and a bit of cash and a bit of impetus can make that change, then so can everybody in this room, and so can the left, and that's what we need to do. And then the Labour Party it's not that the Labour Party will change out of the good of its heart, but it will change because we've made it politically impossible for it not to change. And I also would like to close by asking you to all follow You Can Cut's example of direct action, and suggesting that all of you who live in this area and are outraged by the Green Council's behaviour consider maybe occupying the council's offices, because that would create a lot of press, it would scare the absolute bejesus out of the council, and it would make a big change very, very quickly. I mean, if only half the people in this room did it, it would still create a big buzz. And we're all sitting here talking about this dispute. Well, why don't we go out there and do something? Why don't we all stop talking and start acting? Especially because it's the Green Party who pride themselves on supporting protesters. So obviously it won't be very good for them if they've suddenly got 50 protesters in their offices protesting against their own policies. And that's really the final thing that I I would like to end on quoting the legend Tony Benn himself. The politics of today are discussed in rooms like these, to paraphrase. The politics of tomorrow are discussed on the streets. And that's how we carry on.